Hi, I'm Amanda Ohlke, Director of Adult Education at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. We're pleased to have with us today acclaimed author Olen Steinhauer to discuss the movie All the Old Knives. The movie is based on Olen's 2015 spy novel, and he's also the screenwriter of this film. So Dr. Andrew Hammond, our beloved Spy Museum historian and curator, and I have some questions queued up. And we're going to get into a conversation. But first, just a couple lines about the film in case you haven't seen it yet, but you're already watching our conversation. So here's a quick description. When the CIA discovers one of its agents leaked information that cost more than 100 people their lives, veteran operative Henry Pelham is assigned to root out the mole from among his former office mates at the CIA's Vienna station, Vienna, Austria, not Virginia, gang. His investigation takes him from Austria to England to California, where he is reunited with his one-time colleague and ex-lover, Celia Harrison. And if you don't want to see it based on that description, then you are not a spy film buff. So over to you, Andrew, with the first question.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to speak to you, Olen. The first question is actually related to my favorite quote from the movie, and it is, "Stupidity runs international relations as much as anything else." Some people say never a truer word has been spoken, never a truer sentence has been spoken. Tell us a little bit more about that, because you're not just the novelist, you're also the screenwriter. So tell us a little bit more about that sentence, which I think is quite interesting.
Well, thanks for having me. I believe that one is in the book as well. It's one of the many lines I transferred over. And I think it speaks not necessarily to the level of stupidity in international relations, but more how I grew up believing people running the world they were on the next level as far as intelligence went. And sort of, as you become an adult, you start realizing, no, that's not true at all. They're often far more educated than you are, in particular things, but their basic, what is the word? Their basic instincts are not necessarily more refined than yours. And I think you see that right now in what's going on in Ukraine. Certain leaders are not really reacting in what other leaders consider like a proper way to face off with Putin, and I find it depressing. So in a way, it's more about my naivete than the objective truth of this. That being said, I think it's objectively true also.
Well, we'll bounce back forth between spy nitty gritty and big ideas. So I'll get a little bit into the nitty gritty because as we said in those few lines, this is a mole hunt. And we are familiar with a few famous mole hunts around the Spy Museum. And it's reminds me of one we feature in our gallery about the Ames investigation. Sorry, Sandy Grimes talks about the evidence they had to try to put together to capture Aldrich Ames, and obviously it was financial for him. So, what mole hunts were you inspired by that one, or?
Well, yeah, no, I'm quite aware of that, and of course, there's the famous Philby, and honestly, I probably take my inspiration equally from fiction as well as the real world. You always have to inform your fiction as best you can. Of course, and this is going to be a cliche thing to say, but my favorite mole hunt of all time is fictional. It's Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. It's simply because in the fictional way of approaching this, you're able to delve so deeply into people's stories and motivations. And for Ames, it's Ames who was the Catholic, right? Was it Ames, or am I mixing it up with Hansen.
Hansen was the
Hansen.
Catholic.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
right. So I think I know more about the Hansen one. But in that one, you essentially have he seems a little bit more two-dimensional. With sort of the way people measure out his motivation and stuff. So yeah, there's probably equally fictional and real mole hunts are inspiring to me.
It's so interesting that you say that, Olen, because I don't know if you won't have seen my question sheet, but literally my next question was Tinker Tailor an influence? Detected shades of le Carre, i.e. there's a rotten apple.
Yes.
Because I
Yeah.
totally saw that in the movie, that who is it Tinker, is it Tailor?
Mm-hmm.
The suspicion, the distrust, the compressing of drama within particular narrative. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could always say a word on Tinker Tailor anyway. It's one of the great, to me, it is one of the best novels of the 20th century. It's not just as a spy novel, but in terms of it being a sociological novel, it's a historical novel about a certain period in the UK's sort of fall of empire. And it's a love story. It's so many things in one. And when I was young, or younger, I was learning to be a writer, and I was self-conscious, can self-consciously be a literary writer. I was inspired by James Joyce. And it was reading, I think it was Spy Who Came In From the Cold, but also some Eric Ambler stuff that started shifting me in another direction, saying, wait a minute, you can be incredibly entertaining and still say so many wonderful things and delve probably about as deeply as you like into the world and into psychology, into existentialism even. So yeah. So and then once I read Tinker Tailor, like, it was done. This is what I was doing.
Oh.
Well, I am wondering about, I don't want to don't want to do any spoilers here, but there is a spy handler relationship, and we talk about one in our museum between an Israeli Shin Bet operative and a son of Hamas who spies for him. So that's a real story. Well, you have a handler and an asset that features prominently in this. And so we won't do any spoilers, but how did you shape that idea of that relationship?
If I remember, I wrote this novel, like, I don't know how many years. It's been a while. It's been 7 years ago I wrote it. So and so which came first, the horse or the cart? I believe, if I remember right, this is often how I work. I will be working on the present story, the primary one. And then to understand why people are doing something in the present, I then start to dig back and go, wait a minute, what happened before then? And oftentimes that ends up building the most interesting storylines, these background stories. And I think that was the case with this. I knew about a dinner being had in the present. And then I'd start working my way back. Okay, well, what does this all mean? Why are we here? And actually with this one, it makes it sound a little more, it's like a convoluted approach to writing, which is usually how I do it. This novel was exceptional in that I was inspired by The Song of Lunch, which was this, I think it was just like an hour-long movie on PBS about a couple they split up long ago. They meet again for drinks. The man is still madly in love with the woman. The woman has remarried and is quite happy on her own. And it achieves these amazing levels of drama, even melodrama over a dinner table. So I remember at the time watching this and going, this is brilliant. I wonder if I could do a spy story this way. And then I promptly forgot about it. And then a year later, I was between projects, and then it just came back to me. And the novel came back as like this one big block in my head. And I just sat down and I started writing. And a month later I was done, which is usually it takes me a year for a book. That said, so much of it, even though it had been figured out in my unconscious, so much of it still needed to be sort of mapped out. And I think a lot of this handler asset relationship came out during that writing.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask, just piggybacking on what you were saying there, Olen, with the genre of spy fiction or spy movies, like how much is that something that is like a weight that you carry around and you're constantly thinking about, oh, there's all of these conventions or things that other people have done? How much is it a weight, or how much, on the other hand, is it something that is enabling, something that allows you to pour, a vessel that allows you to pour your ideas into it? Or is it neither of those? Is it just, what, I just do my thing, and then let the chips fall where they may. If people say that it's X or Y, then that's fine for them. So I just wanted to get a sense of your relationship to the genre, which you're now, you've taken a place within that field.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is it gives you structure. Oftentimes if I'm trying to write something that's not in the spy genre, I start muddling around, going, and then I only discover the shape of it until much later. And it does give you this sort of historically understood structure in which there is a lot of freedom. But at the same time, so much really good work has been done that it raises the bar significantly. Like I talk about Tinker Tailor, and don't worry, I'm not going to keep talking about Tinker Tailor, but to me, I hold that novel in such esteem. I've reread it multiple times, that I also know I probably live in the shadow of that book more than anything else in terms of how good you're trying to make it. And I know I haven't achieved that. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But it gives you something to aspire to, which can keep you writing, hopefully forever.
Just quickly, that's like a professional basketball player saying, well, I wasn't Michael Jordan,
Yeah, but you try, right?
You can still be spectacularly successful and not be Michael Jordan.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I will veer away from my direct connections to spying and say something that I think it was on your website, which is a very cool website, Olen, and I like looking at your dossier about yourself. Very cool. But I think the book was characterized, and the movie, that it's about terrorism, love, and revenge.
Yeah.
And you don't usually see those three together, but I was so surprised watching the movie at how intimate it was. And as you've talked about your inspiration for it, but I did not expect this deep and intimate look at a love story. And how, I mean, was that just a challenge you put yourself, and then you're like, okay, spying, love, this lunch. And how did you decide on terrorism?
Well, I'm not sure how I decided on terrorism. I suppose because it was a conceit. It was a situation that was easily understandable by the audience. It was something where I could focus more on the relationship and not feel like I had to completely explicate the terrorist situation. There's a lot of that can be done in shorthand, and the viewer or the reader understands that. As far as the love story, this was something. There is some difference between the book and the movie. Is that the book is much colder, and I kind of did it that way slightly on purpose. I don't know if it was the smartest choice, but I think it works. And when I did the script, I sort of naturally made it, more about the romance, because it made sense within that format. And then when the director came on, Janos Metz, he and I worked on the script, and he was saying, yeah, let's really focus on the love story a lot more. not a lot more, but more. Because this is the reason, this is the story that's being told. It's a love story. It just happens to be in the world of spies. And so we made some reworkings based on that.
I have to say, setting it in Carmel by the sea, I think we all got a little break by watching this that we badly needed. It is a beautiful setting.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the reason why it's set there is because when I watched Song of Lunch, I was living in Carmel, so it was easy. And also, in a way, there was, I think probably in the book, it's kind of like there's some more digs against Carmel, just kind of making fun of it, I think in a lighthearted way. And so I was putting some of my own sort of jokes in there quite a bit, which they didn't all make it through.
I didn't get, and I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't get a chance to read the book. We just got it but just in kind of trying to check back and forth, I'm glad you said it had a harder edge, because I felt like I detected a much harder edge as I dipped in and out. So for those who are reading and watching, I think that's a great point that you've made.
Yeah, it's colder. I don't know. I had my reasons at the time to make it colder. Maybe that's just maybe that was my style at the time. So.
And one of the things that I find quite interesting is a lot of your work, including, the one that we're speaking about today, it takes place, or it seems to take place, on the borderlands between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, or it takes place in Eastern Europe. So I just wondered if I know that you've traveled in that region and been there. So I just wondered if you could help us understand that setting. And obviously, Vienna, famous city of spies, from The Third Man to the spy swap in 2010, to the United Nations headquarters being there,
right.
The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So there's this, Vienna is an interesting setting. Obviously, Berlin Station as well. Berlin, the Cold War city. Yeah. So help us understand that part of Europe that you seem to keep, being pulled back towards.
Well, I would like to give sort of historical and intelligence world reasons for that, but it's mostly personal. I lived in Budapest for a decade. It's where I got married. It's where our daughter was born. The reason why I made a TV show set in Berlin is because we were moving from Budapest to New York. And on the way, we stayed just a few days with some friends in Prenzlauer Berg, which is it's a lovely neighborhood. And we liked it so much that, like, once we got to New York, we felt a little let down, because we were right in the middle of Manhattan. It was noisy. There was construction everywhere. And my wife says to me, find us a reason to spend like half the year in Berlin. Can you do that? Can you find a way to do that? And that's what I did. So I was trying to figure out how to do that. I said, well, if I did a TV show there, that would work. And of course, it's crazy. It actually worked. And we ended up spending like 9 months there of the year. It's mostly personal, but all of that, why did I start going there? When I was 19, I was on a student exchange to Zagreb, and this was 1989. I was young, and I never really drunk alcohol before I started doing that. I started just being a bit of a layabout, but simultaneously while I was there, the Berlin Wall came down. And we went, I went with some friends to Hungary for Christmas, and I was mostly just annoyed because all the stores were closed. It was Christmas, of course they were closed. And we were all having a very bad trip, and I was complaining, they were complaining. We just came back all angry with each other. But I came back and then checked the news and found out, while I was there, the next country over, Nicolae Ceausescu was being executed. And I had no idea. And by the time I got back, I felt such shame about having been there at such a historic time and not being cognizant of it. And so, as a way to sort of make up for my sins, I just started researching heavily. It started with Romania. I wrote a thesis novel set in Romania during the Romanian Revolution. I got a Fulbright grant to go there to work on this novel. And so that sort of started my fascination with this region. And of course, Yugoslavia, in the years after that fell apart. That had its own seismic movements there. And it's an area that, for me, is sort of, I can always find some sort of inspiration in it. There's always something in history. And right now, I mean, we're not living in Budapest, but we're thinking about moving back. But they just had, some terrible elections there, where Viktor Orban was reelected. And, even at this moment, when he's a friend of Putin and we understand what Putin is now, yet he's still got reelected by a significant amount. And so, even Hungary has a very interesting story going on right at this moment, as people are trying to make a more democratic state and failing mostly. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably just continue writing about the region. It's not getting less interesting.
I am going to wrap a statement into the beginning of a question, because we don't want to spoil anything, but there are some killings and potential killings that I know all of our dear friends from the CIA would protest that this can't happen. So I'm not going to ask you direct questions, but if you would comment a little bit on taking liberties with reality, and then please tell us how you feel about the casting, and were you involved with that at all?
Those are two entirely different questions. Yeah, good job.
I work for the Spy Museum. We're bad.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I take liberties. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I don't. And there was actually in the CIA's, what is that? They have a journal on intelligence, I think it is. And they have
intelligence.
Yes, that's the one. And they're in their declassified section. They did a review of my Milo Weaver novels, this trilogy of novels. They were very unhappy with the way it presented. They did actually. They were nice about the books and stuff. Like, they're very entertaining, but don't mix this up with reality. This is I sometimes feel more guilty, sometimes less guilty about this. And I read at some point, I'm going back to it, a quote from John le Carré. And he was talking about how people would come up and thank him for helping them understand how the intelligence world works. And to which he said, I have no idea how it works. Yes, I worked in it, but this was a long time ago. All I do is based on my understanding of like psychology and policy. And that made me feel a lot better, because that's essentially how I approach it. If I create some fictional department, or I have people go out on a limb and do some extrajudicial killings, it's my understanding in a way of like real politics. We're going to do whatever it takes to get the thing that we need, because that thing is so important. And some people might die along the way. Some characters take it one way. Other characters, feel less strongly about the morality. And so, yeah, I'm just telling stories about spies. I'll call it the CIA, but, it's not exactly that. All fiction work lives in a parallel universe. So, and the casting was fantastic. It wasn't really my doing that on this, but it was Janos and the producers working on this. And they came up with, a great group of people, obviously. Chris Pine had read the script before Janos ever came on, and he had actually been attached to it for years. And he was extremely patient. He just really loved the script, which I'm happy to say. And so as we went through different changes, one director would come and leave, one actress would come on and then leave. he just stuck to it throughout. So I know when they cast Celia, that was mostly a conversation between Janos and Chris Pine. And I know he was very enthusiastic about working with Tandy Way Newton, and which I'm glad about because she's such a terrific actress. And they're both very smart. When we were kind of doing like final edits on the script, we brought them in on a Zoom and just did a read through, but a very slow read through of the script that lasted like 3 days, because we would kind of get tired because we'd read a few scenes and then Janos would say, okay, stop. What do you guys think of the last few scenes? Would you say this? Would you say that? And we gave them time to sort of hem and haw and think through, okay, if I'm this person in this situation, would I say these 2 sentences or would I just shrug or nod or something like that? And they're very smart, very thoughtful actors who sort of, I think, really improved these little bits throughout it and strengthened the whole thing.
And that leads on to the next question I was going to ask. How do you research these things? How do you prepare for them? Because on the one hand, like you said, I'm just telling stories about human beings who have to be spies and work for whatever agency or it's set in a particular area. People are looking for intent when there may not necessarily be, like Eastern Europe or Berlin. It's serendipity. It's not.
Yeah.
I thought about the whole of intelligence history and thought I need to have, a series set in Berlin. So yeah, how do you prepare for it? Because like we, at the Spy Museum, we deal with this all the time where we get some people that are like scalds who just say, well, you never done this and this is really what happened. And then we have other people that are, you're making it all about crash, bang, wallop, everybody's a secret agent and it's all overly dramatized, or yours is getting to me more towards the cerebral, parry, like you say, existentialist, philosophical questions. So a whole variety of different places that you can go there, but tell us how you specifically research what you're doing.
So it's reading. I mean, I come up with, it's based on my personal taste or a subject that I want to enter. And then I read on it and simultaneously start coming up with, where is the story going to be set? What groups might be in it? I mean, I'm not that methodical. I don't have like a, a listed process, but I usually research as I go along. So I sometimes write myself into a corner and realize, oh, I just got out of my knowledge. So I have to like stop and then go off and read. I'll read, obviously watch documentaries. When I was in Budapest, it was kind of easier to access people, at the embassy. It's a little harder here in New York. I don't have that circle here anymore. But also in Budapest, a lot of my friends were journalists. And that ends up in the expat circle. You always have a certain percentage of journalists. And they had a lot of stuff that they had gotten on background that they could share if I just kind of talk to them about what I'm working on. And you get a lot of good ideas and a lot of, they can straighten you out on some things. When you've just gotten a little bit out of your depth, they can kind of like help pull you back. And I used to use that a lot. And I think it's just about reading. I mean, I hate to say it, but the internet kind of does have everything. If you just know where to look, if you just keep digging, you can get government reports off. It's amazing, like the little details you can get from thick reports from any government. Just great nuggets throughout.
I cheated and asked 2, Andrew. So if you have another, otherwise I'll ask my last one and wrap up.
No, I mean, I guess the other question that I was going to ask was, you know, you often get this debate, was the novel better than the movie, or the, you know, the movie better than the novel? And in a unique position as being the author of the novel and the writer of the screenplay. So I just wondered if you could tell us, you know, you're the person that had this vision, this idea about a set of characters, about a set of relationships, about a particular period, and you've rendered it on print for the novel, and it's came alive on the screen. So help us understand, as a creative person, what's that process like? What's it like to see it live in two different places?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, as we discussed before, that the novel and the film have a different tone. But one thing is, I think, particularly with this situation, as I was inspired by a film, then wrote a novel that then became a film, in a way, the film might end up being a little closer than what originally inspired me, the original inspiration. Which I hadn't thought about that until now, but I think that's probably true.
You're welcome.
Huh? Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
I'm just joking.
Yeah, but one of the things particularly when you're writing something that's film or TV, like I did with Berlin Station, you have to be okay with collaboration. And so you have to be okay with that original vision, which was clear, slowly being sort of twisted here and there until it becomes, you know, hopefully the result is that it brings it better into focus. But a lot of times it sort of expands or sort of riffs on what you originally imagined. And this one is actually incredibly close to what I wrote, but still, like, I didn't picture what the film was going to be. I couldn't clearly picture that, because I don't. And I have this thing when I write a novel, people always ask me, "Oh, who do you see starring in it, in the film version?" And I never have any idea what to think. I can't predict these things in a way in my mind. I can't imagine who would be best for that character, because to my mind, a very good actor, you know, 90% of the time will probably be able to do that character because they're really good actors. But seeing the final result, I found really really pleasurable, because with Berlin Station, I will watch something and I'll remember during production that we didn't want that to happen, and it happened, and that scene is there. Oh my God, does no one else notice this terrible thing in the middle of it, or something like that, you know? And I still can't get past that. So I think it's a great show that we did, but I still, like, can't watch it with that sort of full objectivity that my friends and family can. So they don't see any of those things that I know were wrong. There's only like 2 of them. It's fine.
Well, what are you working on now? What's next, if you're willing to tell us?
Yeah, it's been a busy time. I've been doing entirely sort of film and TV work, much of it speculative. So it's not like always under contracts for stuff. And so, I mean, there's a possibility of a movie coming out. Actually, no, I mentioned it on another podcast, so I can mention it here. The Tourist. It looks like something's going to happen with that. So that's all I'm allowed to say. And quite possibly another TV show that I've created with someone else. Things are looking optimistic for that. So yes, so lots going on.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Olen. Andrew, thank you for your always incredibly thought-provoking questions.
These are great questions. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
And we want everyone to come to the museum, because you can be inspired at the Spy Museum to write your own novel, and maybe you can be like Olin and doing speculative things
But
someday.
you know, I actually went to the Spy Museum many years ago, and who knows, that could be why I do what I do.
Well, you got to come back because we
I
have
will.
a beautiful new building with all kinds of incredible new exhibits. And Andrew and all of us would be happy to greet you at the museum.
That would be wonderful.
Thanks, everyone. Go see or watch it at home, All the Old Knives. Truly, it will transport you. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It's a really great movie. It was great to meet you.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.